Now I'd like to turn to some more of the modern discussion of just war. And in this, I'm going to begin by just laying out what is arguably the fundamental distinction within this just war tradition. Now, earlier I talked about the just war tradition as stemming, out of Cicero and St. Augustine and up through the medievals and on. We'll touch a little bit on that, but primarily I just want to approach this conceptually in this video and some later videos. Now, the fundamental distinction is this one here, namely between jus ad bellum and jus in bello. These Latin expressions basically just mean justice for war. That's a more of a direct translation. But what we're looking at, is how do you justify war? Like, what's the justification of war? And jus in bello is justice in war, or how do you ethically fight? How can you fight within the confines of ethics? Now, I have this little ampersand, which we read as an and here. And what's happened in the last 20-ish sort of years, probably a little longer now, is the question of how to interpret this little ampersand. Does it divide into two clean parts where you can separate the two? Now, traditionally, as I mentioned in earlier videos, people only talk mostly about this. And this is sort of a government kind of question. And when I lay out the 7 rules, you'll see why it's got a strong political feel to it. And this one is more of a straightforward kind of military question. So it maps onto a political distinction, namely between the government. The government handles this. The government makes the decision when to go to war and then tells the military, you go fight it. And then the military goes, okay, we're not worried about why we're going to war. We're just told that we go to war. We worry now about how to fight it. Now, you find this quite clearly in history, in a lot of literature. Shakespeare, for instance, has various scenes where the soldiers are like, I don't know really why we're here, and I'm sure God's going to have something to say about it. And then the soldiers are told, don't worry, your king has to answer to God. You guys just fight a good, clean fight and leave the question of the justice of war to God and the king, right? Soldiers don't have to worry about that stuff. So this distinction was largely made in a practical sense, to distinguish between the rulers, those in power, and those in the military. And of course, it maps on nicely in a democracy, because we would like to keep these separate, where we say elected officials handle this, right? The people we put in power are ultimately under the sovereignty of the population, that is in a liberal democracy, and they make this decision whether to go to war. But the population's job and the government's job is done after that, because you certainly don't want us voting on how an army, like you don't want the Canadian population to vote on how the army fights the war. That seems to be a military decision. We just say do it ethically, and you guys figure out how to do that. So, but this runs into kind of funny problems, because can you really fight ethically if you're fighting for a terrible cause, right? So a lot of philosophers in the last 20-ish, 30-ish years started to question this split by saying, well, you know what? You can't really fight ethically if you're fighting for a horrible cause. Like, how can a soldier in World War II who is fighting for Hitler fight in any way ethically if they're trying to further the cause, right? So people have this distinction has come under fire. All we need to realize is that there's a lot of disagreements on how to interpret this little connector here. Like, are they radically separate? Michael Walzer, who is the main figure in just war analyses, took a fairly hard line, made them really separate. He even said there was a logical separation. He's a sociologist. I think he used the term logic when he should have used there's more of a historical separation. And so people said, well, clearly there's not a logical separation. Anyways, there's a lot of discussion about this. But sociologists and historians, tend to see them as more distinct, and political scientists tend to see them as quite distinct. And a lot of philosophers say they're not conceptually distinct. So there's, again, a big argument over this. We'll put that aside for now. Our point here is just to get clear on what these terms mean. So 7 rules here, 4 categories here. Let's have a little look and see what these are about. And I'm going to start with Joseph Bell, the justice for war. Like, what does it take to get a war off the ground in a justified way? Well, the rules, the first one that we're going to look at here is the notion of a just cause, right? So you would think, naturally, if you're going to go to war, you're going to need a good cause. It's going to have to be a cause. So justice is brought right in. It's not just a good cause in the sense of, well, it'd be good for the economy, or, you know, there's a lot of valuable stuff over there and we want it, so we're going to start a war, so that would be good for us. No, the just war tradition has said that you need to have a just cause. So that sort of gets the whole ball rolling on this. It brings in the notion of justice, and this was the central idea of many thinkers, from Plato, Cicero, and all that. It's all about justice. It has to be some kind of just cause. Now, it's easy to say that, right? You can say, oh, it's a just cause, I have a just cause. Very rarely do people ever say, I don't have a just cause. But if you just demand a just cause, you have to start unpacking what the content of that would look at, and what it would look like. And what's interesting is that changes over history. So different times and places, people did have different understandings of justice. Again, go read Plato, go read Aristotle. And especially in the Nicomachean Ethics, read what Aristotle thinks justice is. It's not going to dovetail with, let's say, a modern liberal democratic notion of justice. You might relate to some of it, and others you may not, depending on your position. But in any case, the notion of typical what got to be a just cause, that's changed over time. And some of these things that were regarded as just causes, even the articulation of it changed as well. So I'll stop being abstract here. Let's look at something fairly concrete. A typical just cause was the violation of state sovereignty. So if you attacked another, or if another state attacked you, that would be a violation of your sovereignty. They come across your borders. That would be regarded as a just cause to go to war, right? Hey, you broke into our place. Right? But think about it. If you just think about an analogy, just an ordinary analogy, if you're sitting at home and somebody breaks into your place, and let's say they just break a window and they try to grab something off the table, that is a violation of your sovereign territory, because they've broken a window and they tried to grab something in your room. Now, what are you legally allowed to do? Well, let's say you said, you know, yeah, Your Honor, the guy broke my window and he stuck his hand in and tried to steal my wallet off the desk, and, you know, I killed him, right? That probably would not be looked at favorably. It might be looked at, well, yes, there was a violation, but that didn't mean that you got to do just anything you wanted in retaliation. So understanding what might be a just cause is not just something you can easily just read off the world. Even the notion of what does it mean to violate a state sovereignty? What does it mean to actually, you know, if someone does break into your house, what exactly does that mean? And what are you allowed to do? And what's justifiable to do? You might say, well, you could have screamed and the guy ran off or something like that. You could have chased someone off or whatever. You didn't have to resort to extreme violence in the defense of your wallet. So violating the territory might be seen as an act of aggression, but it might not be seen as something that's justifiable to necessarily just going to all-out war. You know, like if somebody invaded Canada, you know, you'd have to make some kinds of decisions. So that's where the debate can come. Even when you agree that a just cause is territorial violation, to try and unpack what territorial violation might mean can be a bit tricky, and there could be disagreements. So violation of state sovereignty, yeah, but the devil's in the details. Another one is what's commonly referred to as other defense. And other defense is exactly what it implies. You come to the defense of another. You see, your neighbor's attacked or whatever, and you come to the defense of your neighbor. We see that a neighboring state is attacked, and we come to the defense of that state. And this, of course, you find in Article 51 of the UN, and this supports the idea that states can help other states, provided the states that they're helping have been unjustly attacked. So once again, the notion of justice creeps in there. And Article 51 lends itself also to the notion of collective defense. Attack one of us, you attack us all. Historically, a rather newcomer to the scene for a just cause is the prevention of humanitarian abuses. So if you think something bad's going to happen over there, right, and it can't be just you worry about it or whatever, but if you think you have real solid grounds for, hey, there's an atrocity building, there's a kind of mechanism such that we think it's going to lead to an atrocity over there, is that just cause to invade? Well, again, the details are where the arguments and the discussions lie, but that's now sort of a newcomer on the scene of what could be a just cause. So the concept just cause is open to interpretation, and it has been interpreted differently. Prevention of imminent harm, if you think that, if a state thinks that it's going to be attacked, and that's forthcoming or whatever, it can take steps to attack. Even in the history, like things like honor and value and things like that were regarded as just causes. Now we're not as sympathetic to that. Typical unjust causes were, just blatant territorial expansion, blatant attacks on others for natural resources, for instance, and the one that's becoming more controversial, one that's actually flipped out of the just unjust, is the notion of regime change, right? That's a hot topic, has been in the last few years. Well, for a while, as I mentioned in an earlier video with the Treaty of Westphalia, you didn't go in there and to another state. Princes stayed in their own states, and they left, whatever the other prince was doing over there. You may not like it, but you left them alone. Now, we are talking more, and it's tied into humanitarian intervention, where it's like, the notion of state sovereignty has been changed. And if state sovereignty changes, the just cause concept for interventions can change. So now, is it legitimate to go in and change a regime in another state? Well, for a while there, people were like, no, you don't do that. That causes wars and problems. Stay out, right? And maybe it's better off in the long run not to do that. You might have to turn a blind eye to something bad now, but if you get in there, you can make it worse. And we often hear those kinds of arguments that if it's a mess right now, as sometimes some military people will say, if you've got a two-body mess going on where there's conflict and you put another one in, what you've got is a three-body mess, and that's much worse. So, but on the other hand, people say, well, no, wait a second. Sovereignty has been, shall we say, problematically interpreted in history as you get to do whatever you want in your backyard and I do whatever I want. What if if I've got a moral state structure and you've got this, you're committing atrocities? Why should the world stand by and allow that to happen? So, even the question of standing by and quote unquote allowing to happen, this is now part of the discussion where it wasn't always. So the concept of just cause is an important one. It has to be articulated, has to be, quote unquote, given content. Now, you might say, well, can't you just do anything you want? Not really, but the thing of, but it obeys the spirit of just war in the sense that it does force people to put some constraints and some attempt to justify their reasoning. So 1 out of 7 down, the notion of just cause.